A deadly setback in Gaza tonight in the ongoing struggle to provide desperately needed humanitarian aid. Video obtained by CNN shows an airdrop of aid going very, very wrong when a parachute malfunctioned and the contents fell at a high speed toward a residential building. At least 5 people on the ground reportedly were killed, 10 others injured. I want to bring in CNN's chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward. She's joining us from Jerusalem right now. Clarissa, does this underscore how badly the aid delivery system is failing the people of Gaza?
Well, there's no question, Wolf, and there's still a lot of questions here. We don't know exactly what nationality that aid drop was. The U.S. has said that all of their bundles were safely delivered today, so it could be, a different nationality. We just don't know. But as you say, really, this underscores the absolute tragedy and, frankly, the impossibility of trying to effectively deliver aid relying on things like aid drops. We heard from one humanitarian official who said, quote, airdrops are good photo opportunities, but a lousy way to deliver aid. And that's why you've seen, I think, Wolf, President Biden trying to establish a new mechanism, building a pier to allow the U.S. to deliver aid directly to Gazans by sea. But as we heard today, that could take up to 2 months. And those are 2 months, Wolf, that Gazans don't have. And again, aid workers saying even the pier, it's a glaring distraction. The best way to deliver aid is on the ground, but you can't deliver it properly and effectively without some kind of a ceasefire in place, Wolf.
And we saw something very disturbing today. You were there. You saw it in person. You saw some Israeli protesters attempting to block aid going from Israel into Gaza. Tell us about that.
So, Wolf, this has been going on for over 6 weeks now. It's a group called Sav 9. It's made up of some settlers and former reservists, but also ordinary families who believe fervently that all the aid that gets into Gaza is going to Hamas and that there is a better chance of getting hostages out safely if they completely cut off aid from getting in. Now, we've seen Israeli authorities who had been kind of turning a blind eye to these guys taking a much tougher line and preventing them from actually crossing into the area where the trucks are entering into Gaza. But still, these protesters are going on a regular basis, spending hours trying to skirmish and outmaneuver the police. And what's interesting, Wolf, is according to a recent poll done by Israel's top polling institution, the Israel Democracy Institution, some 68% of Jewish Israelis believe, as these protesters do too, that international aid should not be able to get into Gaza, Wolf.
Clarissa Ward reporting for us from Jerusalem.
According to a recent poll done by Israel's top polling institution, the Israel Democracy Institution, some 68% of Jewish Israelis believe, as these protesters do too, that international aid should not be able to get into Gaza, Wolf.
A remarkable report now from our Clarissa Ward about aid to Gaza. President Biden today told reporters Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu must allow more of it, where millions are in need of food and the medical system is near collapse. Airdrops are providing only limited assistance. Today, the Pentagon said that the floating pier the president announced during his State of the Union address to ferry aid into Gaza could take 2 months and 1,000 troops to actually build. With those developments as a backdrop, here's Clarissa's report.
They march with determination to the Kerem Shalom border as they have for 6 weeks. Their mission, to block international aid from crossing into Gaza. The border police are waiting for them. There is a danger of sniper fire and projectiles, the officer warns. I ask you to leave this place. But the protesters are undeterred. Made up mostly of hostage family members, former reservists, and settlers, they ignore the order and change course to move closer to the crossing.
So you can see the trucks with aid over there. The police had been trying to stop the protesters, but then they've just cut through this field and they're pushing ahead.
How can anyone check these trucks and see what's inside? Where bags of rice that are meant to go to their children are filled with bullets.
Under international law, it's Israel's obligation to make sure that the ordinary citizens of Gaza don't starve to death. And right now they are starving to death.
Hamas is making it very difficult because Hamas is not allowing this to arrive. They're not holding it. They're not receiving it. But we will do it. I'm telling you here and now. If we knew it's getting to children of Gaza, we would do it. This does not arrive at their doorstep. This arrives into the tunnels of Hamas that are fighting us and holding our hostages.
There's no evidence to support the idea that all of this aid is going to Hamas.
Not to the rest of the population. This is intelligence only for terror. That's why they should get only the minimum calories required to survive.
They're starving to death.
They are not.
They are starving to death.
You know what? If they are starving to death, give the hostages back. No, a single loaf of bread should go there till our hostages are coming back.
To many people in the world, listening to what you're saying and what you're protesting for, it sounds like a contravention of international law, and B, incredibly callous in the face of an epic humanitarian catastrophe, in the face of children starving to death. People can't understand why anyone in their right mind would advocate for stopping aid.
Hamas has no fair play. Hamas has no rules. Hamas is holding civilians.
You know, even if there is a humanitarian crisis there, and there is not, even if there is, it's my right and my duty to prioritize the life of Kfir Bibas, a 1-year-old baby that is there, over any Gazan baby.
And with that, the interview is over as the protesters press on. Previously, they'd managed to block aid trucks from crossing. But on this day, the police have been given their orders and no one is getting through, prompting anger from the crowd. You are confused. Go deal with the war, this woman shouts. We came to help you. Unable to cross here, the protesters try their luck in another area, but the authorities are just as quick to stop them.
So the police are now really starting to lose their patience. They've been trying to push these protesters away for hours now, and still they're not leaving.
The crowd on this day is small, but their sentiment is shared by the majority of people in the country. A recent poll by the Israel Democracy Institute found that 68% of Jewish Israelis oppose the transfer of humanitarian aid into Gaza. On the other side of the border, the situation could not be more dire. 7-year-old Fadi Al-Sant is suffering from severe dehydration and malnutrition. Doctors at the Kamal Adwan hospital say they don't have the resources to properly treat him. Fadi's mother says she's already lost 2 children, and she doesn't want to lose him. According to Gaza's health authorities, at least 17 children have died of dehydration and malnutrition already. And with the UN warning that famine is just a step away, there is hardly room for debate. More aid needs to get to more people as quickly as possible.
And Clarissa Ward joins us now from Jerusalem. So who are these protesters?
So the protesters that we spent time with, Anderson, are part of a group called Tzav 9, which means Order 9, as in like a military order. And they are primarily made up of former reservists, but there are also some kind of far-right settlers among the group. But it was really interesting because when we talked to some of the people who were there, it was actually kind of a mixed bag as well. We talked to an elderly woman from Long Island. We talked to a woman from Bangor, Maine, who you saw briefly in our report there. And I think this poll really underscores something that maybe a lot of people aren't talking about, which is that the majority of Israelis do have some sympathy with this opinion that aid shouldn't get into Gaza because they believe that is only going to take away some leverage that they have for getting the hostages safely out, Anderson.
Has there been consideration at all by Israel of opening up other border crossings in the north? Because right now that crossing is further south, and still any aid that gets in, trucks have to drive all the way up north, and that obviously creates a lot of problems.
Right, and this is really crucial, and we know that this has been a source of friction with the U.S. The U.S. has been pushing really hard for them to open up some crossings in the north. It had seemed like it was about to happen, and then all of a sudden, nobody's talking about it anymore. And any aid worker will tell you that really, if you want to distribute aid effectively, forget airdrops, forget sea piers. The only way to do it is on the ground, and the only way to do it properly on the ground is with some kind of a ceasefire in place. And I do think it's important to underscore something, Anderson. There were protests yesterday as well that took place, with many Israelis coming out to say that it is not acceptable that the people of Gaza are starving to death. And they were actually trying to get aid into Kerem Shalom border crossing. They weren't successful, but it's important to remember that Israel's not a monolith, and there are different opinions reflected here.
Yeah, that's an important point to make. Clarissa Ward, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
مرحبا جماعة، من شوي وصلتنا المساعدات الأمريكية تمام يلي نزلنا من الجو. شوف علي يا جماعة، أنا حورجيكم إياها تمام حبة حبة. أشياء يعني ليس لها علاقة بالأكل، ريحتها كريهة جدا تمام. هيها شوف علي، أنا يعني ما قبلتش المساعدات، جتنا من الجو من الأردن، حقبلها من دولة شريكة تجويعنا وشريكة بهذه العبادة الجماعية. مش فاهم، أنا مش داخلة عقلي تمام. على العموم يعني هاي المساعدات أنا ممكن أقبلها من دول عربية أو من البرازيل أو من دول جنوب أفريقيا، من الدول الداعمة لفلسطين ولغزة تمام. وحقبلها لما تجيني من معبر رفح أو أي معبر تاني، أوكي؟ تجينا عشان إحنا بني آدمين، ما تجيناش من الجو، أوكي؟ هذه مكانها واحد وحيد. هاي المساعدات تنحط بكيس أسود زي هذا، أوكي؟ وبتنحط، ثواني أورجيكم وين، وبترتمي في الجماعة اللي زي هذه.
In Washington, new information about President Biden's plan for a floating aid pier in Gaza. The Pentagon now says it could take up to 2 months and 1,000 troops to build the pier in Cyprus. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen toured the staging area for a new maritime aid corridor into Gaza. Cyprus is the closest EU member to Gaza. It says it bears a moral duty to help ease the humanitarian crisis. But aid group Médecins Sans Frontières says instead of trying to create a workaround, the U.S. should insist on immediate humanitarian access using the roads and entry points that already exist.
UN experts have accused Israeli leaders of, quote, intentionally starving the Palestinian people in Gaza, with over 500,000, according to the UN's World Food Programme, now at risk of starvation.
Will there be a ceasefire by Ramadan? It's looking tough. But are you concerned about violence in East Jerusalem without one? I sure am.